in the last video we covered the basics of solving radical equations. This one's going to go a little bit further, solving some of the more difficult ones. I don't want to say difficult, maybe a little more complicated, but they all come back to that same basic equation. So let's look at a few more. Let's say that we've got square root of x plus 4 equals 10. So before when we saw a square root, we knew that the opposite was square, but the problem is we'd have to square the whole left-hand side and the whole right-hand side. We can't distribute an exponent. So this is going to give us kind of a mess here. We saw that at the very beginning of the first video. So we don't want to do that. If we can, the first thing that we want to do is we want to try to get the square root by itself. That's going to make our life a whole lot easier. So let's move this 4 to the other side. Okay, we're going to get rid of it on the left, put it on the right. That's going to give us square root of x is equal to 6. This is a lot easier to work with. So now we've got square root is equal to a number. We've got the square root by itself. Now we're going to square the left side and the right side, and we get x equals 36. Much more manageable than what we started with. And then remember, we need to check. So putting it back into the original equation, square root of 36 plus 4 is equal to 10. 6 plus 4 is equal to 10. Yep, that checks. And we can go ahead and keep that one. Okay, so we want to try to get the radical by itself whenever we can. Let's try another one. Let's say we've got x plus 2 minus 1 equals 3. We want to get the square root by itself, so we're going to add 1 to both sides. So we get square root of x plus 2 equals 4. Now we've got the square root by itself. We can go ahead and square both sides. Okay, square and square root cancel. We get x plus 2 on the left. On the right, we get 4 squared, which is 16. And we want to get x by itself, so we're going to do the opposite, which is minus 2. And we get x equals 14. Let's go ahead and check that. We check it back in the original equation. 14 plus 2 under the square root, minus 1 equals 3. So this is square root of 16 minus 1 equals 3. And 4 minus 1 equals 3 is indeed true. So we can go ahead and keep that answer. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Get the square root by itself. Let's try one more of this variety. Let's say that we've got x plus 2 square root plus 5 equals 3. Same idea. We're going to get the square root by itself. And we're going to get x plus 2 is equal to negative 2. Now we talked about this. Oh, sorry about that. We talked about this in the last video. Right here, when you see square root equals a negative number, that should be a huge red flag, because we can't have a square root equal to a negative number. So right there, you can stop and say this answer is not a real number. It doesn't exist. But let's say you didn't notice that. You got the square root by itself and you went ahead and squared it. That would be okay. So we're going to square both sides. We're going to get x plus 2 on the left, because the square and the square root cancel. And we're going to get 4 on the right. This looks fine. We do minus 2 minus 2. And we get x equals 2. So if you didn't catch that little hiccup right there, you should catch it in the check step. And this is why you have to check. So we would have square root of 2 plus 2 plus 5 equals 3. Square root of 4 plus 5 equals 3. So this is going to give us 2 plus 5 equals 3. Nope. 7 does not equal 3. That does not work. So we would throw that out, and that's got to be does not exist. Now, if you check your only solution and you get that it does not exist, you really should go back and check your math. And when you check your math, you're going to see right here, that's where you should have caught it. If everything looks good with your math and you don't have something weird like this, you might just have gotten the wrong answer. So if you before you throw out your only solution, do go back and check really carefully and make sure that you did your work right. Okay? All right, let's try a couple more. Let's try one with a cube root. We haven't done one of those yet. Let's say we've got cube root of x plus 1 equals 4. So just like before, we want to get the cube root by itself. And then remember, the opposite of a cube root is a cube. The opposite of a cube root is a cube. So we're going to cube both sides. On the left, the cube and the cube root cancel. And on the right, we've got 3 cubed, which is 27. Now, it's a good idea to go ahead and check these, but we don't have any issues with positives, negatives, and false solutions. So these 100% should check, and it's just a good idea to check them to make sure that you got the right answer. So we do cube root of 27 is 3, and of course 3 plus 1 is equal to 4, so we know that we got the right answer. Okay, now moving on to some other cases. Let's say that we've got square root of x plus 10 minus x equals negative 2. This one's different because we've got 2 sets of x's. We've got an x in the square root, we've got an x out of the square root. We can't put these together because one's in the square root, one's not. Remember that from your addition, subtraction sections. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the square root by itself, just like we did before. So let's add x to both sides. We're going to get square root of x plus 10 on the left. We can't put x and 2 together on the right, so it's just going to be x minus 2. Now, just like before, we've got the square root by itself. We're going to square both sides. And remember, we've got to square the whole left-hand side, and we've got to square the whole right-hand side. You cannot distribute exponents over addition and subtraction. We have to square the whole right-hand side. On the left side, the square and the square root cancel. And on the right-hand side, we're going to have to FOIL this out. This is x minus 2 times x minus 2, and we FOIL. So we're going to get x squared minus 2x minus 2x would be minus 4x plus 4. Or you can remember the squaring formula. So now we've got a quadratic. We see that x in there, the x squared in there. We know that this is a quadratic. And this is why we put 6.1 before this section. For those of you working out of the Valencia textbook, we're going to need to solve this quadratic. We're going to move everything to one side and hope that it factors. We want to try to solve by factoring. So we're going to do minus x on both sides to get those together. And we're going to do minus 10 on both sides to get those together. That's going to give us a 0 on the left, which is what we want. And we're going to have x squared minus 5x minus 6. And we want to know, does this factor? Factors of negative 6, that give us negative 5. We should have negative 6 and positive 1. Okay, so they multiply to be negative 6. They add to be negative 5. We've got something times something equals 0. We know that we can break that up. I'm going to come over here. This is a little big. So we can break that up. X minus 6 equals 0. X plus 1 equals 0. And we solve each of these little bitty equations. So we get positive 6 and negative 1. Okay, so this time we got 2 solutions. And when you get 2 solutions, especially with 2 solutions, you really want to check because they might both work, but a lot of times one works and one doesn't work. You can't assume that the negative answer is not going to work. You have to actually check it in the original equation and see. So let's check 6 in the original equation. Okay, so we plug 6 in. We're going to get square root of 16 minus 6 equals negative 2. 4 minus 6 equals negative 2. Yes, that does check. So we can keep that answer. And then we're going to check negative 1 in the original equation. So we plug in negative 1. We get square root of 9 plus 1 equals negative 2. That's going to be 3 plus 1 equals negative 2. Nope, that doesn't work. It would have to be negative 3 for this to work. Double check your math. But no, that does not work, and we've got to throw out that solution. Okay, so don't always just throw out the negative one. You actually have to check the answers and see if they both work or if just one of them works.